market adoptions, so OEM legal constraint, SDG policy, mobility industry, and some policy in South Africa. And finally, we will have an open Q&A session with all of you. So you are invited to send us all your questions, comments, and remarks via the chat function. Today, the panel will again be facilitated by Serdar Yüksel, who is the director of the Mobility Alliance at UTEC Chamber. But first, now I'd like to hand over to Benedikt. Thank you, Benedikt. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Bernd, for your welcome words, and thanks for the invitation, of course. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome from my side as well to all of you to the digital event of the Mobility Alliance today. I'm Benedikt Würz, and I'm Vice President of the European Senate of Economy and Technology and Director of the Germany Alliance of EU Tech that is hosting this event today, as Ben said. And please let me introduce our EU Tech and EU Senate environment in a nutshell to have a little warm-up to the session. As you can see, I prepared a few slides for you. If you cannot see the slides, please click on the presentation button at the bottom right corner besides the hand button. Let's start. The EU Tech Chamber was founded in 2015 with this vision: technology obliges. And now, 7 years later, 2022, we are Europe's leading tech organization in this regard with over 2,000 advocates. That's how our EU Tech members are called. We are a registered NGO, as you can see here, and we have three major goals. We have the first goal is competitiveness, to strengthen European technologies and to promote European values. Sustainability, that means reaching the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations, around the globe through European technology, and growth in the middle, access opportunities in Europe and emerging markets. You see in this slide that we believe that we reach each goal with technology solutions. So for our organization, for us, technology is the key and not prohibitions or restrictions. And on the next slide, you see the value proposition. And our value proposition is always free, transparent, and independent. As you can see here, we divide into toolbox and programs. In the toolbox, we offer our members services for free. For example, our publications, these are white papers, position papers, and our Visions for Europe magazine once per quarter. We have all our sections or alliances. They organize one public digital event per month, like today, the Mobility Alliance. And if we sum up that, there are over 200 events per year. And in addition to that, we have internal meetings and working group meetings where our directors and members discuss about their own topics. And we have our virtual technology center. You are in it right now. This is our matching platform with which you can reach the whole world. And for our members, this center, this tech forum is for free, even the included virtual booths where each of them can present their company. Of course, we have also trade fairs and exhibitions. I will come back to this later. We have big EU tech summits. We have delegation trips. And just to have a few examples, we have some financial subsidies for selected members. They can locate, for example, the social media program or the trade fair program and EU Tech Center Investment Forum, SDG awards. The question is, okay, we have a value proposition, but how do we work? How do we achieve these goals? How do we fill this value proposition? You see, we have 16 different alliances. These are divided into regional alliances, impact, and tech alliance. In our regional alliance, we work on topics that are specialized to, for example, Africa or Germany to Latin America. So very different topics in defined regions. And in our impact alliances, the region plays not that important role. Here we are discussing about overriding topics, so that are related to, let's say, the higher goals of mankind, like SDGs, policy, climate action. And on the right-hand side, you see our tech alliances. And here we discuss about defined specific topics like today, mobility. So the most important thing about our work and about this slide, you see, is that we are combining those different alliances. To give you an example, we are working on energy topics that is specified to Germany in our Germany Alliance. But then we combine the results of it with the Mobility Alliance. And this interdisciplinary combination around the world, this is very special for EU Tech and the European Senate. What about our convening power? We have over 200 webinars, I said that before, and working group meetings. We have 50,000 registrations, and 90% of those are company owners or board members or CIOs. And also our speaker database is growing faster and faster with nearly, I think we have over 700 keynote speeches now per year. You see, we have a quite, let's say, very good outreach in our tech forum. As you can read it here, it is an advanced and multifunctional digital platform. You have effective and wide-range business expansion and worldwide profiling. And in addition to that, we have a strategic partner, the European Senate of Economy and Technology, where I'm in charge of. The European Senate stands for Economy and Policy, and it is a highly regarded network with personalities from economy, politics, and sciences. And the main goal of this European Senate as a strategic partner of EU Tech Chamber is to provide support in solving the most important questions of our future, but absolutely, for the most part, in the interest of the common good. It was founded by the Senate of Economy in Austria, and that is an honorable council that advises the government for nearly 20 years, and by EU Tech Chamber. So our members of the European Senate are not only senators, but also fully integrated EU Tech members. And in addition to that, they are strategic partners of the EU Tech alliances because they are often more concerned with strategic issues than with the daily business. In most cases, they are owners and CEOs of large companies around the globe, and they have different perspective, and that has a positive impact to the whole EU Tech environment as well. So the EU Tech is the large network with 2,000 members, swarm intelligence. That is the asset of the EU Tech Chamber. The asset of the Senate is, in addition to that, the heads. So the CEOs and the owners of the large companies. And this is a very strong partnership because the Senate adds its physical offline events in different European capitals to those virtual EU Tech events like today. So to keep our members informed, we send out a weekly newsletter with, let's say, updates to upcoming events, programs, and initiatives. And this is the point to invite you to staying in touch. On the next slide, please feel free to follow us on LinkedIn so you can join all our events for free. And every alliance has its own LinkedIn group, of course. And so you can join our weekly networking as well. And the last slide from my side is engage and inspire. So the partnership for your development, innovation, and sustainability in the new world. Nothing to add. And now that was my short part. Short deep dive into our EU Tech and EU Senate ecosystem. Now I will go out, but I will return at the end of the event to present a little gift for you, dear panelists. Thank you very much for listening so far. Have a great panel, and always keep in mind, of course, technology obliges. And now I think I will hand over to the director of the Mobility Alliance and our today's moderator, dear Serdar Yücel. The floor is yours. Thanks for listening, and see you later.
Thank you, Benedict. As Benedict and Ben before have mentioned, the Chamber wants to achieve specific targets. The European Technology Chamber is a network of people knowing from many perspectives what technology is and how to deal with technology. If we take this seriously, we have to bring together the relevant stakeholders. So let me introduce to you all François Guichard, our keynote speaker today. François supervises the activities on legal and regulatory aspects related to vehicle automation and connectivity at the United Nations Economic Commission for Europe. Previously, he worked as line manager at Daimler, dealing with active safety regulatory matters. He started his career as international management associate at Mercedes-Benz and dealt with projects related to cost management, marketing, quality management, and emissions certification in Germany, the USA, and South Africa. François, it is our great pleasure to have you here today. It is now time to share your ideas with us. The stage is yours, François.
Hello, good morning, dear colleagues. I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me for a second. I'm having difficulties, Serdar. I'm very sorry.
No worries, please. It happens because these platforms sometimes need some time to discover.
So I hope you can see now my screen.
It is popping up, Francois, and I will tell you when we see it. Yes, we see it, but not in the presentation format. Now it is in presentation format. Thank you, Francois. It's yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear colleagues, and I hope you will trust me working on digital affairs, even though I have problems to share my screen after 2 years of COVID. So trust me, we are not that bad. So joke aside, so I'm very pleased to be with you today, and I will mention our activities at UNECE with regard to guidelines and regulations for the performance of automated driving systems. It's a pleasure to be with you. Maybe UNECE is not known to you. UNECE is an agency of the United Nations. This is part of the UN Secretariat. This is one of the 5 regional economic commissions of the United Nations established under UN ECOSOC. Some of you might know ECOSOC. This is a body of the United Nations like the Security Council. UNECE, with regard to transport, is a custodian of 59 conventions. And recently, UNECE received the honor from ECOSOC to have a mandate that is both global and regional with regard to transport. Now, today we are talking about automated vehicles, and I would like to mention some of the conventions of importance for this matter. Some of you must have heard a few years earlier that automation was not possible on roads because of the Vienna Convention. So the Vienna Convention must be known from some of you. So we have 2 essential road traffic conventions, the 49 Geneva Convention and the 68 Vienna Convention on road traffic safety. And I put the maps of the countries applying these conventions. So the first one on the top is related to the 49 Convention. The second one is related to the 68 Convention. And we have also some important agreements with regard to the adoption of UN technical regulations for the automotive sector. And one of them, which is very useful for the Europeans, is the 58 agreement. We have also another agreement, which is a 97 agreement, which is not related to the construction of vehicles, but PTI, periodic technical inspection. And we will hear about that, I guess, from Gerhard Müller a bit later today. And we have also another agreement, a 1998 agreement, which is for the adoption of global technical regulations. And so the third map on the right is related to the 58 agreement, and you see the member countries. And the last one in the bottom is the 1998 agreement. So as you see, we have some agreements in which we can operate with diverse countries involved. So because of these differences in terms of membership to the agreements, we decided to work in a unified framework. And China, the EU, Japan, and the USA came up with the idea of having a unified framework, the framework document on automated vehicles. And this document is guiding the activities of the working groups drafting technical regulations. And this document contains also a kind of program management in which we specify what activities should be performed until when. And the highlights of this document are the safety vision, and I will come back to it, the key safety elements that should be taken into account, and the timeline. This document was adopted in June 2019 and revised several times. So this slide is to show you that there is a global effort to deal with automation and connectivity. I mentioned the safety vision. So the safety vision is addressed to the regulators joining the fora dealing with technical regulations for automation. And I highlighted here some important aspects. So one aspect is that automated autonomous vehicles shall not cause any non-tolerable risk. So it's very open, but this will be for the regulators to explain what this means. This is guiding their activities. This is also saying that these vehicles should not cause any traffic accident resulting in injury or death that are reasonably foreseeable and preventable. So the safety vision is not saying that automation should take into account anything that could happen, including a meteorite coming from space. So this is the framework in which these countries that I mentioned earlier operate. The document is also mentioning key issues and principles considered as a priority. And you see here the long list, and this is starting with system safety, fail-safe response, so the usual things that you would imagine related to these technologies. So in order to implement the program set by the framework document, we have 4 working groups. And I don't want to go too much into the bureaucracy and the details, but just mentioning the groups as you may hear about them sometimes. So the key group is the functional requirements for automated vehicles. So this is the group that is really defining the requirements. We have a second group about the validation method for automated driving, VMAD, which is working hand in hand with the first one. And in this group, there is a multi-pillar approach defined and explaining how to validate the safety of these vehicles. We have also a third group dealing with data storage system for automated driving. So this is the group dealing with data that are collected in these vehicles. And this group is also dealing with EDR, Event Data Recorder, as you may know, it's also in Europe. Then the last group is dealing with cybersecurity and software updates, also covering over-the-air software updates. So this is what is structuring our activities, and this group are there to work according to the framework document principles and program. So I mentioned the activities related to technical aspects, the construction of vehicles, the safety assessment, etc. But as we all know, we need also to address the aspect related to road traffic safety, road traffic safety and the use of these vehicles. And we have created a group of experts. The first meeting of this group was in September last year, and the group is working to complement the 1949 and 1968 road traffic conventions. So we had the third meeting yesterday, so we are still working hard on identifying exactly how we want to proceed, given the variety of positions expressed by the various regions. As you imagine, the needs and the position of the United States of America would diverge from the EU one, for example, or from the Asian one. So there is some serious work and negotiation ongoing. The first item was related to identifying the road safety risk that would need to be addressed by a new convention on road traffic safety. And the second aspect is to identify the mechanisms and the right legal instruments that could be adopted by the different member states of the United Nations. So with regard to road traffic safety and road traffic, I want to mention also an important amendment to the Vienna Convention, the 1968 Convention. So the first one was in 2015, and this was related to this famous sentence, that every vehicle has a driver, and the driver is in control of his vehicle or should be able to guide his animals. So many people make fun about this sentence, but even in the most developed countries, we still have animals on streets. My daughter is riding a horse, and sometimes she is on streets, and I don't always know who is in control of who. My daughter is probably sometimes controlling the horse, but I'm not completely sure. So we still have this situation in traffic, so the sentence is still accurate and up to date. But we have a second amendment also to the Vienna Convention, and this second amendment will be in force in July 2022 if everything goes well. And this amendment contains definitions for automated driving systems and defines also dynamic control. And there are also some conditions explaining what the international community consider as fine in order to have these vehicles in traffic. So this will be a big step. This will enter into force in July if everything goes well. And if this is the case, then you can expect that some countries like France will also issue some regulations with regard to automated driving. So now I want to mention a few recent achievements. So most of the level 2 technologies today on the market, especially the European market, are type approved according to UN Regulation 79. So we have a UN regulation covering some ADAS systems. And we have also a first regulation, a technical regulation, with regard to the first level 3 system, with a very narrow ODD, because we are just covering traffic jam situations on motorway and speeds below 60 km/h. So you see a very conservative start with the level 3. This will include also not only cars, but also trucks as of June 2022. And with this approach, we want also to move step by step, and we discuss currently the technical provisions that would allow the type approval of lane change on motorways and speed up to 130 km/h. For the time being, there are 3 vehicles which are developed according to UN Regulation 157. There is a model from Honda, which came on the market in Japan in March 2021. And there are 2 models from Mercedes-Benz that arrived on the market last quarter. So I mentioned the very concrete cases, but we have also the more generic approach from the FRAB and VMAT groups that I mentioned. The second aspect that I would like to highlight is related to connectivity, including over-the-air software updates. So there we issued 2 major UN regulations. One is related to cybersecurity and cybersecurity management system. And this regulation, according to McKinsey, has a very important impact in terms of cybersecurity itself, but also in terms of markets. And the conclusion of the report is that between 2020 and 2030, the cybersecurity market in the automotive sector will grow and double to reach, I believe, something like 10 billion. So the impact of this regulation is very visible also because of mergers, acquisitions, and partnerships. We saw, for example, LG acquiring Cibellum, and also Fujitsu having a partnership with Upstream Security in Israel. And the second regulation, Regulation 156, is about software updates and over-the-air software updates, which is also something essential as this is guiding the market with regard to updates of vehicles, which is quite new. I think the only one that really did that before this regulation was Tesla, and now with the regulation, more manufacturers will also offer this kind of services. So many activities. I presented UNECE. Of course, all these things, these achievements, these regulations are not drafted by UNECE. We are just a secretariat. We are a small secretariat. We are managing a network of up to 4,000 experts covering all the aspects of the automotive sector, passive safety, general safety, automation, etc., etc. The meetings include between 120 and 240 expert per sessions, and we have almost 1 meeting per day. So as you can see, this is a big network. And in total, we have around 11 working groups, formal and informal. So as I repeat, so this is not UNECE with the secretariat drafting regulations. We just gather a lot of experts from the member states of the United Nations, from the NGOs, and we have today, for example, Gerhard Müller. CETA is an essential NGO at WP29, as many others. So yeah, the work is a collective work. So I tried to put on one slide a scope and time estimation. So I mentioned the activities with regard to ALKS, this first level 3 ADS regulation. I mentioned UN Regulation 79 with regard to ADAS, and I mentioned the activities of the 4 informal groups. So how does it fit together? And as you can see on the diagram on the left, we have the different levels of automation that are defined by SAE International, and they are the use cases. So with the first UN regulation on level 3, we have covered a very narrow space. And we will cover a bit more, but it will still remain narrow. And there is a general consensus to adopt the FRAV and VMAD approach to cover all the categories of vehicles, all functions, all use cases, and all speeds. So we will stop with this step-by-step approach, most probably as we had with ALKS. So, and how does it fit? What is the timeline? So for ALKS, we have it already into force. I mentioned that there will be an amendment into force in 2022, June, for heavy vehicles, trucks, buses probably also. And there are activities related to increase of speed and lane change. And if everything goes well, the entry into force could be in January 2023. But we have, as I said, these 4 working groups dealing with all these aspects mentioned. And then the timeline is end of 2022. The first soft law will be out, and there will be then the question of the implementation. And the activities related to EDR, the SSAD, they will come a bit later. We expect them to be completed by mid of 2024. So this is the current plan according to the framework document and the diverse activities that we have. So what is the impact on the European market? So we have these global activities from FRAV, VMAD, etc., and we are producing guidelines and recommendations in an iterative manner with definitions, with requirements that are step-by-step redefined, becoming measurable, etc. And these kind of guidelines and recommendations are flowing into the activities, for example, of UNECE, but we see also an impact on, for example, EU regulations and activities. And as you know, at the European level, there is also an essential work related to the level 4 small series regime and also covering urban shuttle and valet parkings. The colleagues in Brussels are very active on that and doing a great job, and they took over some of the recommendations and guidelines that they negotiated with their colleagues at UNECE. So these are the same colleagues. What is produced in the guidelines and recommendations will also come into the type approval regulations. And I mentioned already traffic jam pilot, motorway pilot, that is in the pipeline, and more would probably come. And separate from that, I would like to mention that the activities, the regulatory activities with regard to the level 2 are continuing. We have already many vehicles on the market in compliance with Regulation 79. And as you know, sometimes we hear also criticism. I want to mention, I hope I don't do a mistake, but I think this is a Tesla that is not fully satisfied with the approach of Regulation 79. And we have also a task force where Tesla has also an important role as the secretariat. We are working on the new regulation on what we call DCAS, which is a subset of ADAS. So these are the activities ongoing and their impact on the EU with regard to automated driving systems. And I would like to conclude my presentation mentioning that I just mentioned these specific activities, but we are looking also at artificial intelligence in the context of vehicle regulations. We had already some workshops. We worked on definitions, use cases. We are reviewing the impact of this technology on regulations. We work also on remote access to in-vehicle data. And here there is a strong call from European stakeholders to make sure that requirements on cybersecurity is not preventing also fair access to in-vehicle data. And we have still some safety features activities. So it's not because we deal today with automated driving systems that everything is perfect and sorted out with regard to simple safety or active safety. And for example, we are currently working on the electric vehicle braking. And here I want to mention especially the activities on electric trucks where the braking performance is under review. And with that, I will conclude my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. And I hope that this quick overview was interesting and answering some of your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francois, for your keynote, sharing this comprehensive insights. I'm sure many of us have had some idea on your introduction to regulating the performance of automated driving systems. These are mainly the aspects of our mobility needs and desire for the regulation of automated mobility, although we are still encouraging our dear audience to provide their comments and questions in the chat. I guess it is now a perfect time to integrate Gerhard Müller, Andrei Karasek, and Andiles Kosana in our discussion. But before we start with our panel talk, I'd like to introduce them to all of you. Gerhard Müller, after graduating in mechanical engineering from Munich's Technical University, TU Munich, he started his professional career at TÜV Süd in 1989, where he was authorized as motor vehicle inspector. Until now, he held various management functions with effect from March 1st, 2011. He's head of motor vehicle, he's head of external affairs and public policy at TÜV Süd Mobility. Since 2012, Gerhard Müller supports the International Motor Vehicle Inspection Committee, CITA, C-I-T-A. In 2019, he was elected as CITA president. In his role, he is dedicated to improve road safety and making traffic more environmentally friendly. Gerhard Müller is currently engaged in the political discussion about the future testing procedures for automated driving vehicles and the use of in-vehicle data. And Andrei Karasek is a market strategist, investor, and company principal focusing on personal branding, corporate influencing, opening new markets, implementing sustainable solutions, ensuring impactful relationships, initiating forward-thinking acumen, accelerating growth of corporate verticals and international businesses. He has more than 10 years of experience in innovative development, especially in mobility, automotive, and startups in the EMEA region. He is the founder of Caraco International, a German institute for innovative and SDG solutions. Through strategic alliances and networks, research activities, seminars, etc., undertaking project management, business consulting, preparation and implementation of projects and related measures in all kinds of companies, partnerships, technologies, as well as other investments. And Andiles Kosana has 21 years in the development and pre-development fields, over 21 years in the development and pre-development fields. His professional experience spans the public service, corporate, and private practice, all with a focus on working with infrastructure and cities. He is the director for the Mobility Center for Africa, MCA, advocating for connected, autonomous, shared, and electric CASE is the abbreviation, and mobility among industry players, government, and academia. Andiles Kosana is a development strategy advisor and leads an infrastructure and city development consultancy focused on packaging and preparing projects for funding, financing, and implementing for the public and private sector. Dear audience, at this point, I'd like to general note again and invite you all to share with us your questions about the keynote or around our theme today, automated vehicles from legal and regulatory perspective. You can please send questions at the Q&A section in the public chat, and we will pick some questions to discuss among our panelists. Please do not wait until the end to send your questions. You can do it anytime. Now, let's start our panel with Gerhard, Andrei, and Andile, and come to the first talking point. In the keynotes, we learned the need for regulating the performance of automated driving systems. These are main aspects of our mobility needs and desire for the regulation of automated mobility, but perhaps we can continue with a bit of an overview of other aspects of vehicle data for road safety and environmental protection, and market adoption, OEMs, legal constraints, SDG policy, mobility in industry and policy in South Africa. So Gerhard, Andrei, and Andile, the first questions I would like to address to you first. After that, I would also like to hear the views by Francois. All are representatives of global companies and consultancy businesses and academia and international organizations, being the executives from your experience, how can we see the demands in mobility? For example, Gerhard, why is access to original in-vehicle data so relevant for road safety and environmental protection? Then the question to Andre will be, which type of autonomous vehicles might experience the fastest market adoption? And the question to Andela will be, how well developed is the private sector driven mobility industry and policy landscape in South Africa and the continent at large? And then Francois would like to comment about the presentation you have done to regulate the performance of automated driving systems, Francois, but you did not mention activities related to periodic technical inspections. Is this the end of PTI, periodical technical inspection, Francois? But maybe we can start with you, Gerhard. Why is access to original in-vehicle data so relevant? Please.
Serdar, thank you very much for the introduction. So I think we all agree that new technologies are very promising to make road traffic safer and cleaner. And I'm convinced that automated driving is a precondition to reach the goals of Vision Zero and even will help to reach the goals of the Green Deal, which are the two initiatives of the European Commission. But the challenge is to keep the high standards of modern vehicles over the whole lifetime of the vehicle. So, and therefore, we also need to have the possibility to inspect these vehicles not only in the beginning before they are registered, but also during the whole life cycle. And you mentioned already the PTI, which is very important. And whole life vehicle compliance increasingly depends on electronic components, software versions, or even artificial intelligence algorithms. So this needs a minimum access to minimum set of data, because if you want to do a proper inspection or evaluation of these modern technologies, you need to have access to data, and you need to have access to independent data, to original data, because we as vehicle inspection companies are either authorities or authorized companies. So vehicle inspection around the world is a sovereign task, and this needs that we have to get access to original in-vehicle data to do an independent and proper evaluation of these systems, and to guarantee that these systems are working properly during the whole life cycle of the vehicle. And just to give you one example, we made an experience with a small parking bump, and the sensors came out of tune only a few angular degree. And this leads to a kind of squinting sensors. So, and this leads to the effect that in a distance of 20, 30, 40 meters in front of the vehicle, the sensors are out of tune and giving wrong information to the systems to brake at the wrong time or not to keep the lane in the right way anymore. So we have to be able for any kind of vehicle inspection to evaluate these sensors, to evaluate the functionality of the systems, and therefore we need access to a minimum set of data.
Thank you, Gerhard. And Andre, what about the market adoption? The fastest one, please.
Regarding market adoption, thank you very much. We need to look at the usage. So the corporate and public use will be very, very strong at the beginning because of stable cellular connection. So we don't rely on remote areas as we move on with strategies. And the law will therefore need to be changed and be compatible with individual and private traffic. From the other perspective, we need to mention and highlight that all those autonomous vehicles will be high probably electric or hydrogen, mostly electric. And from that perspective, it opens up also the space for ride-hailing services, where it's approved and confirmed by McKinsey organization that one shared vehicle can replace 13 conventional vehicles on the road. So all that can actually reduce the traffic and also a little bit help us with social development goals but about that a little bit later. So as we speak about autonomous driving and rail first and caution move to allow the technology to be used in specifically designed areas and by fewer users. And first then, when the law will see the potential and approve those details, then we can speak about adaptation and moving into the stage of proving of concept. On one hand, the expectation and society implementation will increasingly place and high actually the safe requirements for new technologies from the perspective of science and technology. So all vehicles which are out there needs to fulfill 100% faultlessness, and that will also require very strong quality proof and verification processes for OEMs.
Great. Maybe Andile, you can give us information from South Africa.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you, colleagues. Good morning. I think from South Africa, we're very, very honored to be part of this discussion because our industry and the policy environment is not yet as developed as the European one. But to just begin and frame a context for our audience, South Africa, even with our constraints, we are bound by the same business pressures that we've got to decarbonize and to modernize the way that we move around in our cities. So as Mobility Center for Africa, we've always focused on what we call the 4 wicked mobility problems around crashes, where driver error is the cause of most of the accidents on our roads, around about 15,000 accidents or deaths that we experience on South African roads a year. And then we've got congestion and affordability and environmental concerns, all that play part of the challenges we face around mobility in South Africa. Well, the role of industry is still fledgling, and that's where organizations like ourselves and yourselves advocate for government, the private sector, to work together to come up with policy changes. And I think, as Andre is saying, there's a need for the policy to change. I think Francois, you mentioned the description that the driver must be in charge of the vehicle. That's how our legislation is still, our regulations are still written. So when we talk about autonomous vehicles, the role of the driver is physically wanted. Well, the regulation talks about the driver in the car rather than as a system and all of that. So we're at a point where we're still growing the policy environment. We're bringing awareness about how autonomous vehicles can begin to address all our challenges. So we're looking at the latest technology to solve all the 4 wicked mobility problems that we have here in South Africa. Thank you.
I see many challenges ahead of us, Andile. And how do you see the periodic technical inspection, Francois? Will it end soon?
So the question is a bit provocative. This is, of course, to induce a very positive answer. Of course, there is a very big importance of periodic technical inspection, of course, for the conventional vehicles and also in future. Gerhard Müller just explained one of their findings related to a little shock in the bumper. The vehicles are more and more facing technical requirements that are extensive before the vehicles are put on the market. There are also life cycle requirements, that are checked before the vehicles are arriving on the market. This is the case, for example, for cybersecurity. We will all agree that checking the cybersecurity when the vehicle is going to arrive on the market doesn't really make sense. There is an importance to cover cybersecurity over the lifetime of the vehicle. And with regard to safety, so we will continue to have the mechanical parts on these autonomous vehicles. So there will still be the same role as today for the PTI. They will have to pay attention at things that cannot be checked electronically. There is always a sensor somewhere that can provide information, but at some point you have the mechanics. But of course, we cannot limit the role of PTI to these mechanics checks and safety checks of basic nature. There will be more and more importance of the electronic systems, and therefore PTI will also evolve. There will be more and more work related to data, I imagine, from the discussions we hear here. There is an importance to share data, as it was explained. So the role is going to continue and evolve as the technology is evolving. We all adapt to technical progress. This is the case for traffic rules. This is the case for rules related to the construction of vehicles, and this is the case for PTI. Thank you.
Good to hear, François. We will still feel safe by using inspections. And thank you, Gerhard, André, Andele, and François, for sharing your perspectives to the discussed form of automated vehicles. And for the next topics, I would also appreciate the ideas from each of you. Again, the framework conditions and strategy must be designed to ensure technical and organizational tasks to implement legal and regulatory perspective of automated vehicles. And André, how can OEMs prepare for the legal constraints associated with the coming complexity of transport? I understand. And Andile, you may like to give us your comments about what are some of the initial successes that Mobility Center for Africa, MCA, has registered, so that we can get more informed about South Africa. And François, several prominent organizations and partnerships develop standards, we know that. And is the work of Work Program 29 redundant with the one of standard developing organizations? Maybe not, we will know more when you respond. And then Gerhard, how can a fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory access to vehicle data be realized now? And maybe who wants to be the first to share any thoughts on these aspects? This time, maybe André, would you like to start with OEMs?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question and very important one. Automated vehicles are likely to be socially accepted only if the perceived benefits, depending on the degree of efficiency, and outweighs the expected risks. So depending also on the degree of automation itself. To reduce the risks, manufacturers conduct an accident data analysis and corresponding risk management. That's very strategic. For automotive manufacturers and suppliers, I see very crucial that autonomous vehicles are a product of innovation with a market potential, but also with a risk. So we need to invest into decisions and market launches preparations to actually define their risk and to calculate it. A couple of perspective to look at are, for example, brand image. Will the brand image be damaged in the long term if automated vehicle fail? Does my vehicles, from the perspective of OEM, meet the customer's expectations? And what defects could lead to product recalls as safety requirements actually increase and increase? And what is the risk of product liability, as we know that human being is higher positioned than an animal or than a property? In a nutshell, the task of standardizing approaches to autonomous driving can hardly be done by legislation alone, but requires multi-stakeholder exchange involving customer protection, watchdogs, cybersecurity experts, as already mentioned by my colleagues, and governmental institutions and car manufacturers altogether.
I understand. And Andile, what about the initial success? About the Mobility Center for Africa is registered.
I think from our side, I mean, we pick up from exactly what Andre is saying. It's the first step is to create an awareness and an acceptance in the society for autonomous vehicles. The Mobility Center for Africa managed to get an autonomous, the first one permitted on the African continent in 2019. And with that first vehicle, it was a Navia shuttle. We got it here in South Africa, and it operated for about a week. That what we found with that process is that we had to work as the advocacy agency with our regulators to understand how other regulators in other parts of the world have approached the view around autonomous vehicles, given that our legislation and regulations are still silent on it. And through a collaborative process of understanding how these sort of tests are done, how the regulation could be amended and improved, we were able to get all the necessary approvals and exemptions to be able to have the vehicle operating on one site. It was the beginning. It's a beginning of a discussion that we're taking forward now post-COVID, where we wanted to run on 6 different sites, where we were testing here in Gauteng the same autonomous vehicles for delivery and operating in very closed and controlled environments. So very much awareness raising and getting an understanding that the latest technology is a tool that can be implemented on the African continent. So that's where we are. Thank you.
Thank you, Andile. Now we understand better. And how about the work of work program 29, redundancy, Francois? What can you say about that?
So yeah, this is the acronym for this working group dealing with the technical regulations I mentioned. So we are a harmonization body. Harmonization means that if there are requirements out there, we try to harmonize them to facilitate implementation, to facilitate trade, to improve safety and the environmental performance. So in some cases, we cannot fully harmonize in the sense that we don't have a basis. They are not technical requirements. And in that case, we have to develop by ourselves the technical requirements. And the countries are implementing them. So for example, South Africa is contracting party to the 58 agreement. So South Africa can rely immediately on our technical regulations if they wish. This is of course a sovereign task. And we are basing our activities, our reflection, our developments on what is existing, and therefore there is a very high value from the standard developing organizations. So the ISOs of this world. Now that we have this complexity, there are lots of partnerships, also more informal things where different companies come together and try to achieve a result. And this is also something that we are observing. And with regard to vehicle connectivity, for example, we received updates from the 5G AA. Some of you must have heard about this initiative between the automotive sector and the telecommunications. So we are really basing our activities on the work also that is performed in the standardization. Of course, there are variants. The technical requirements are minimum performance requirements, and standardization is not always meant with a sense of stringency. So I hope this is demonstrating the importance of having regulations, but also standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Francois. And what about access to vehicle data, Gerard, making it fair, reasonable, or non-discriminatory? How to do it?
Thank you, Serdar. Yeah, you are right. This front principle, fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory access to vehicle data is absolutely necessary, because the car industry at the moment introduced a model. It's called extended vehicle, where the car manufacturer at least is owner of all the data, and the car manufacturer can decide who will get data and what kind of data somebody will get. And this is not a basis where we as vehicle inspection operators can do our job properly, because we cannot rely on the data the car industry is willing to give us. So we as CETA introduced a so-called trust center model. This model is fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory. So this is an independent access for sovereign public bodies. It's a kind of an independent governance model. And one principle is the separation of duty. So this means that the one who is collecting data and exchanging data is not the same who is identifying the participants and deciding who will get access to the data and who will be authorized for the access to data. So this is one principle of our system we introduced. And we also have to make clear that the access to data cannot be limited for vehicle inspection, because today we do not know what kind of data we will need tomorrow, because these technologies are developing so fast. So we as vehicle inspection operators, we need to have not an unlimited access to the data. And last but not least, I want to say that the model we introduced, the Trust Center model, is also in line with the European Data Strategy and the Data Governance Act. And this corresponds with the data trustees, which are mentioned in the Data Governance Act. And I think we need here regulation to solve these problems. It's not something which could be solved by the market itself, because the position of the car industry is very strong. And if we want to really protect society from negative impact of these new technologies, we need access to a minimum set of data, a non-discriminatory access to guarantee that the vehicles are safe the whole life long. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerhard. And maybe before continuing with some other questions I have, Andre, what is your view about this data sharing? In considering OEM's point of view, if we take competition into consider, what would you like to say about this, Andre?
Great question. So OEMs need to.
Since you are from the industry, I really try to understand your view. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So from the industrial point of view, there is in automotive world no competition today. So what we see is more alliances than ever, and each OEM doesn't recognize himself as a lone worker. They try to acquire, merger, or also partner up with different startups and technologies. And it can be LiDAR technology, it can be sensor technique, it can be different telematics systems or data providers. So they understand that they need to cooperate more with other suppliers to fulfill the needs of future clients.
Thank you, Andre. And maybe back to Gerhard. Do you see this cooperation too?
At the moment, I cannot see this cooperation. At the moment, it's still the way that the car industry is the bottleneck, and they decide who will get what kind of data. So I think this must be regulated, and if we find not a solution between the different stakeholders who are interested in the data collected by the cars, I think then we need legislation who will regulate it.
And Francois, what do you think about this? What to do, maybe from your point of view?
So this is something that is currently discussed. In that specific area, we might have to either develop something or harmonize with the activities that are taking place currently, for example, within the European Union and other regions. I don't know exactly what is going to come out of these activities, for example, in Brussels and elsewhere. But in any case, we already heard that the provisions that we have on cybersecurity could be, according to CETA and others, maybe a blockage, for the access to in-vehicle data. So I believe this is something that will be discussed in various locations. It's wonderful to have proactive partners and stakeholders like CETA developing solutions. And this will be a negotiation, because if you look at precedents, before connected cars and automated vehicles, there were smartphones. And if you have a look at the situation there with regard to access to data, you will see that this depends very much also on the stakeholders developing the OS of the smartphones, etc. But I think that there is a willingness, at least in the European Union and in other regions, to discuss these things. So I think that there will be a solution. And as Gerhard mentioned, things are not going to be solved by the market itself. So regulation will most probably be necessary. Either these regulations will be more local or regional, for example, within the European Union, or this will be fully international. The advantage of having fully international regulations and systems is that this apply basically, this cascade down to all regions. So it's not limited to a specific region. So it can cut costs. It can also immediately provide assistance and help some countries to leapfrog, even though they are not fully active in this domain. But so the discussion is ongoing here at the United Nations, and therefore I cannot be more precise. Thank you.
Sure. This is more than welcome that now we know more. And just before passing to the coming questions, since it's the same topic, I see in the public chat, why do the car owners think they have a right to all data? Because they are collected in the car. This is somehow in contradiction with the comments by Gerhard about the fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory access right. Or do you agree, Gerhard? What is your comment on this question?
So I really believe that the data collected in the car belong to the car owner or the driver, and this is not the situation we have today. And be honest, this is something which must be regulated, because it's also about privacy of the car owner. And maybe you have heard this situation: if you have a leasing car and you give it back after 3 years, that a lot of data are still in the car. So the persons you have to you call to, or the ways and the destinations you are driven to. So I think this is something which also affects privacy, my personal privacy, and I think this needs to be regulated.
Thank you, Gerhard. And Andile, sorry, please, Francois.
Maybe very quickly. So in the European context, I'm not sure that there is such a thing than owning the data. I think that the GDPR is about the use of the data. This is an important distinction. And if the market recognizes it and negotiate on this basis, this would maybe help. And the second thing I want to say is that so far, the manufacturers didn't collect that much data. This is rather new, so they didn't even figure out, for some of them, what is their business model. So that must, in some aspects, they could be, it could be said that they are a bit late with this kind of business model. And this explains also the difficulty to access to the data. So these were 2 comments. Thanks.
Thank you, Francois. So in this way, I think we also answered the other question by Bernd Mattner about the rights of individual users to the data they produce. Is this from interest also in the discussion on regulatory level, or if you see any further need for further comments, you can please put into the public chat. And Andile, about the next question, what are prospects for the future of mobility in the continent? And then I will ask again, Francois, about AI is equipping vehicles and powering automated driving systems. Are technical regulations and standards obsolete already, as they could be easily defeated by AI? And then, Gerhard, how can the risks of the new technologies installed in automated driving vehicles be minimized? And then Andre may like to give, if you see possibly a correlation between SDGs and trends towards autonomous driving, and how can SDG policy benefit from autonomous transport? Also, shortly, you may like to comment, what about other vehicles on the road? How might the daily driving routine look like in the near future? Yes, please, maybe Andile, we can start with you. What about the prospects for future, please? You're on mute, Andile. Yes.
Thank you. So maybe to begin, let me talk about the data and connected vehicles. We are seeing here a lot more high-end connected vehicles. So if there's a comment I can make is that the global standards around data transparency and sharing are really useful for driving the discussion here. Most of that data is trapped in proprietary systems and the connectivity. And it's not yet a big discussion, at least in South Africa. But what is interesting from our perspective is that we are very clear that autonomous vehicles are an important part, albeit a very small part of the innovation that we need to bring here. In South Africa in particular. South Africa manufactures quite a lot of vehicles for most of the OEMs, and a lot, in fact, almost all of them are internal combustion engines. It's a huge threat that we are aware of because a big part of our industrialization is reliant on a technology that is increasingly and quite quickly becoming outdated. So our focus on the latest technology and autonomous vehicles really is about anchoring the South African economy into the future, into future-ready technologies and being part of the way the world is moving. But around trends around mobility, electric vehicles are quite expensive. So they're very small part. They're for a very small part of most African societies. Where we are shifting our focus around electric vehicles is looking at micro-mobility, two-wheelers and three-wheelers. And COVID has been very useful in driving the e-hailing, e-delivery sector on the continent. And South Africa has benefited quite a lot in the growth of e-delivery services. So there's where one of the places where we're busy exploring how future mobility, data, electrification, and decarbonizing that last mile, how we're exploring how that nexus is taking place and shaping policy in that environment. But on the continent as a whole, there's a much stronger cultures around two-wheelers, and really we believe that that's where the mobility discussion is going to move, about how do we make two-wheelers cleaner, more responsive, and basically right policy that accommodates for that going forward. So hopefully that gives a bit of a sense of where we see mobility going on the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you, Andile. And Francois, what about AI?
So AI is a very fancy technology that exists on board of vehicles. So it's very interesting what can be achieved with the technology. This brings also new challenges for regulators. But the approach of the regulator is to be technology neutral as much as possible. So what we try to define are validation methods for the vehicle, checking the performance, overall performance, and therefore not so much the specific aspects of the technology. But we are discussing AI in particular because there are some aspects of the use of the technology that could create new risk or things that would justify regulatory intervention. And this is under discussion, but we heard from the industry that they would also understand if there would be some regulations around the use of data in order to train AI agents which are used in vehicles. So, some of the AI technologies in vehicles maybe don't need to be regulated, and maybe, if we speak about natural language processing, or managing via the voice the head unit, or changing the radio, this kind of things, it would not probably require regulatory interventions. But as soon as this is about object recognition and relevant for safety, there could be some aspects. But we didn't reach the situation where the AI was so advanced that it could defeat the regulation. Thank you.
Now I understand why it's not still intelligent as we dreamed about. And yeah, please, Gerard, how to minimize the risks, do you think?
Yeah, I think we are already on a good way to minimize the risk. As Francois Guichard introduced earlier, he mentioned some regulations for type approval. There are 155 regarding cybersecurity, or 156 regarding software updates. So we also have some regulations for lane keeping assisting, for intelligent speed assisting, but this is all relevant at the moment for type approval. And I think we have to keep pace for the inspection during type approval for the tests with the new technologies, as well as with all the other inspections during the whole life cycle of the vehicle. And we have roadside inspections, we have roadworthiness checks like the PTI, which was already mentioned. So what we have to do is to guarantee that these new technologies are working properly during the whole life cycle. And this needs a minimum data access to evaluate independently these functionalities. And I think it's the same as we do with normal cars, let's say normal car without any electronic components. They have to be checked every year, every second year. And the same needs to be done with new technologies, but maybe even more, because software updates are uploaded by Tesla, for example, once a week or even more often. So maybe we have to also think about a shorter frequency of testing of these software updates of these electronic components in the future, to guarantee that these technologies to work properly during the whole life, during the end of the vehicle.
Got it. And about the SDG and autonomous driving correlation, Andre, what would you like to say? And maybe you can also comment on what about other vehicles on the road, about data driving routine in the future, etc. Please, Andre.
Yeah, thank you. So I totally agree with Francois, Andile, and Gerard on the complexity of AI steps which we need to take, about also bottleneck from the perspective of OEMs cooperation. There is also potential to improve. And Andile, I agree with you on coil industry and industry development on the African continent. But from my perspective, from investment, there is space to go and move, and just copy paste scenario. That's great opportunity. So that's how I see. I always try to multiply the assets by the opportunities. One of the opportunities for OEMs is SDG. It's very very important, and at the same time very easy to implement SDGs. One of the way to look at is new materials and interior of the vehicles is evolving and changing. With high services, taxis, robotaxis, we see Rimac, for example, on the market of European Union is now working on taxi robot. supported by European Union very, very massively. And of course, we can expect that those interiors will be different. And there are OEMs like Lynk & Co, for example, using only upcycled and recycled materials in those vehicles for a European continent. So that would be the easiest way from the material perspective and recycle and upcycle process. And from the perspective of consumption and traffic, we see autonomous driving trend as supporting the entire consumption decrease and CO2 levels decreasement, because with intelligent systems, which actually autonomous driving supports, we can then deliver more fluent traffic and commuting as the whole. So there will be no stop and go. There are definitely new approaches and activities to in front of us.
Thank you, Gerhard, Andre, and Francois, for your contribution. It's not an easy topic, and we had a very precise and tangible discussion. So I hope I haven't promised too much at my introduction. And in the end, we must solve a global challenge, and therefore need the local, regional, national, and global alliances to create awareness and foster collaboration to establish all the required legal and regulatory perspective for automated vehicles. We now, I see, have some more questions from our listeners, and some have just been discussed in the panel and in the chat. Here is the next question. It is to Gerhard about owning data by the car owner. Maybe you already responded, but would you like to take this? What about the case where the automated vehicle is used for public transport? Who is then the owner? The public transport operator or who?
This is an interesting question, but normally by public transport, you do not know who is sitting inside the vehicle. So you don't know the name of the person. This is the difference. So these are normally a huge number of data collected by an undefined group of persons. So this is the opposite compared to a vehicle which is driven by me, for example. Then you know that I'm driving and I'm calling people.
Okay, and then Francois, would you like to also comment this?
Well, I think the future is not yet written, and there will be lots of intelligent solutions and lots of new business models. So I think we don't know really the answer to the question today.
Yes, but do we know the other answer? The answer to the other question: which regions are driving the regulations of autonomous driving? Most Europe, North America, China. Do they have different focus in the regions? Maybe Francois, you may like to comment.
So there are different approaches. So you see, for example, that in Germany, the manufacturer pushed for level 3 on motorways. In the USA, you would have way more active, in cities. So there are different kind of technologies being developed. It's very interesting. But it's also very interesting to note that all the stakeholders are meeting at the United Nations, and they are agreeing on timelines, program management, etc. So competition is good. There is some kind of competition between regions. It's very healthy for technical progress. But there is also the willingness to advance together and make it happen. Given the complexity, the difficulty for regulators, but also from the technical level, I think this is very valuable to have this kind of cooperation.
Thank you. And that was the last question in the chat. And I would like to get your final comments if you have any more, maybe starting from Andile. Any final remarks would you like to give?
No, I'm very encouraged about this discussion, because what it says to us is that there's colleagues who are thinking through these policies, and there's tools that we can share with our regulators and our industry and academic actors here. So we're looking forward to working with the Mobility Alliance going forward. Thank you very much for this.
Thank you, Andile. And then Andre, any final remark or any other comments?
You see, so EU Tech Chamber, this is exactly the alliance which is needed, and this is what I told about. So this is very easy to come together and come up with different solutions and proposals. And again, it's great trend in front of us from the data perspective, AI, and also maybe hopefully clean cities very soon. So thank you very much for this opportunity to being here.
With pleasure. It's our pleasure. And Gerhard, any final remark or comments?
Yeah, with pleasure. So I think these technologies are so promising for me to make traffic safer and cleaner. And we as society, we as all the stakeholders should do our best to make these new technologies as safe as possible and minimize the risk as most as we can.
Thank you, indeed. And about you, Francois?
Well, the world is really new. We had very new elements recently. We have lots of challenges that we know about with regard to road safety, environmental performance of vehicles, new thoughts about mobility, different approaches. Some countries thinking about reducing maybe the use of mobility, using more bikes, going less far away. All these things are creating lots of uncertainty. We are still very much relying on transport. Transport is correlated to economic performance. So hopefully we will find the right mobility system, useful for people and also fine for the environment. And hopefully automation will be able to contribute to that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
We hope so. We hope so. And any final comment, if you like, also Bernd, from you, if you like to comment?
Yeah. So thank you very much. I think that was a very good conclusion, and it's directly in line with the discussion we are having here in our Mobility Alliance. Yeah. So also to bring in the social perspective, because at the end it has to solve our needs. Yeah, for all of us. So thank you very much for your very comprehensive insights.
Thank you. And time has just flown by. We are almost at the end of our talk. Gerhard, Andre, and Francois, I know you all and all. I could have spoken for much longer since you are passionate about this topic. And we need global players like you, Gerhard, Andre, and Francois. So let me quickly say thanks to Bernd. A big thank you to Francois for your keynote speech. And thanks to you, Gerhard, Andre, and Andile for having shared your views in such a succinct and structured way, not only your thoughts and insights on this topic itself and beyond, which EU Tech will now honor our panelists in a specific way. Our chamber will provide you the 3 certificates. Let's give floor to Benedikt Grütz. Yes, please, Benedikt.
Yes, Sarah, thank you for being here again. As I mentioned in my introduction, I'm happy to present this little gift, the 3 certificates. As you can imagine, climate protection is very important for us as an organization, and therefore EU Tech and European Senate are very active with our Climate Action Partnership. And I would like to thank you on behalf of EU Tech and the Senate for your contribution. We really appreciate that. And here we go. Herewith, the European Technology Chamber confirms that a tree for André, a tree for Andile, a tree for Francois, and a tree for Gerhard has been planted in Africa by EU Tech Climate Action Partnership. So congratulations. And again, we really appreciate this great panel. Thanks for being our guest. I think today there were a lot of good points to discuss about further. And now, my second short part is at the end. And now, ladies and gentlemen, have a great time. Thank you very much for being our guest today. But for the honor of the last words, back to you as Director of Mobility Alliance. Dear Sarah, thanks for listening.
Thank you, Benedikt. And then finally, thanks to you, dear audience, for your time and the great questions and comments. Please do get in touch with us for any questions, thoughts, and ideas that have arisen from this talk. Whether or not there are many ways to get to know us and our work better. One is by participating on our monthly events or bi-weekly networking meetings. You can follow from our mobility.tech.forum homepage, like this one today, to connect with other experts and to evaluate the solution space for a system change in mobility. See you next time. Have a good one, and bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.
A lot. Bye.
Thank you very much, Andile, Francois, Gerard, Andre. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.